Trump news at a glance. President tries to stop chaos at airports. And just when it seems like the system is beginning to stabilize, there's another layer that most people are completely missing. Because airport chaos is not just about what's happening on the ground. It's about how information is being managed in real time. Notice how quickly the narrative shifted from isolated delays to a nationwide concern. That shift didn't happen accidentally. It happened because once a system-level weakness becomes visible, it changes behavior. Travelers cancel flights, businesses delay meetings, investors reassess exposure, and suddenly, a localized issue becomes a national economic signal. Think about that. Now here's where it gets even deeper. Data from travel booking platforms between March 23rd and March 27 shows a noticeable dip in forward bookings for April, nearly 7 to 9% lower compared to projections made earlier this month. That's not panic, but it's hesitation. And hesitation in markets is often the first sign of a broader slowdown. Because once consumer confidence starts to shift, even slightly, it ripples across sectors. Airlines feel it first, then hotels, then retail, then energy demand. This is how micro disruptions turn into macro signals. But let me walk you through something even more strategic. While domestic travel faces pressure, international diplomacy is entering a critical phase. Behind the scenes, there are ongoing discussions involving not just Iran, but also European intermediaries, particularly France and Germany, who are trying to stabilize the situation before it escalates further. Now imagine negotiating global security while your domestic infrastructure is under strain. That creates urgency, but it also creates opportunity, because urgency forces faster decisions, and faster decisions often lead to concessions. Here's where leverage becomes fluid. If the United States can resolve its internal disruptions quickly, it regains negotiating strength almost instantly. But if delays persist, it creates a perception gap, one that adversaries can exploit. And perception, in geopolitics, is often just as powerful as reality. Now let's talk about financial positioning. Hedge funds and institutional investors are not reacting emotionally. They're positioning strategically. Increased volatility in airline stocks, stable but cautious movement in oil, and slight shifts in defense sector investments all point to one thing: uncertainty pricing. Defense contractors, for example, saw a modest uptick of around 3 to 5% during this period. Not because of confirmed escalation, but because of anticipated risk. That's how early money moves, quietly, ahead of headlines. And this is where the story connects back to Trump's response. His administration is not just trying to fix airport lines, they're trying to prevent a confidence cascade. Because once confidence drops below a certain threshold, recovery becomes exponentially harder. That's why the language is controlled. That's why the actions are visible. That's why the response is fast. But here's the question no one is asking loudly enough. What if this is a stress test? What if this moment is being used to measure how quickly the system can adapt under pressure? Because if you're planning for larger disruptions, whether economic, cyber, or geopolitical, you need real-world data. You need to see where the bottlenecks are. You need to see how people react. And right now, that data is being generated in real time. Think about the implications of that. Now let's extend the timeline further. Moving into April and May, we enter a period where travel demand historically increases by nearly 20 to 25% due to seasonal shifts. If the system holds, confidence returns. But if even minor disruptions continue, they compound. And compounding disruption is where real economic damage happens. Because businesses start to adjust long-term strategies, not just short-term plans. Airlines may reduce capacity forecasts. Investors may shift capital. And policymakers may be forced into reactive decisions rather than strategic ones. That's a dangerous position for any government. Now layer on top of that the upcoming international deadlines. Trade discussions, security alliances, and economic coordination meetings are all scheduled within the next 60 to 90 days. These are not routine meetings. They are decision points, and decision points require leverage. So the real battle here is not just about fixing delays. It's about restoring leverage before those meetings take place. If you're still watching, this is exactly the kind of deep analysis you'll only find on ANC News. So make sure you stay connected, because these patterns are only getting more complex. Now let's zoom out even further, because what we're seeing is part of a broader global pattern. Systems are being tested: financial systems, supply chains, digital infrastructure, and now transportation networks. Each test reveals vulnerabilities. Each vulnerability creates opportunity, and each opportunity reshapes power dynamics. The United States is not the only player in this game. China is advancing its Belt and Road logistics networks. The Gulf states are investing heavily in aviation infrastructure. Europe is tightening regulatory frameworks while expanding regional connectivity. Everyone is positioning. And in that context, even a temporary disruption in U.S. airports becomes part of a much larger competitive landscape. But here's the final layer, the psychological one. Because beyond economics and politics, there's perception. How people feel about stability, reliability, and control. When travelers see long lines and delays, it affects confidence. When markets see volatility, it affects investment decisions. And when allies see uncertainty, it affects diplomatic alignment. This is how soft power shifts, quietly, gradually, but significantly. So as we move forward, watch not just what happens, but how it's framed. Watch the language, watch the timing, watch the responses. Because in geopolitics, nothing operates in isolation. Everything is connected. Every delay, every statement, every decision feeds into a larger narrative. And that narrative is still being written. The airport chaos may fade from headlines in the coming weeks, but its impact will linger in data, in policy, and in strategy. And that's where the real story lives. Because what we're witnessing right now is not just a disruption, it's a signal. A signal that the system is under pressure, that decisions are being accelerated, and that the balance of power is subtly shifting. The question is not whether things will return to normal. The question is what the new normal will look like once this phase passes. Because history shows us that moments like this don't just resolve, they transform. And as always, the biggest transformations start quietly, before the world fully realizes what's changing. This is not the end of the story. It's the expansion of it. The pressure is building, the timelines are tightening, and the stakes are rising. And as this unfolds, one thing is clear. The geopolitical chess match is just getting started, and ANC News will continue tracking every development. Please like, subscribe, and share. More new news will come tomorrow. Thank you.